Today, September 24th, 2020, we have protests erupting all around the country over the final decision that was made over the Breonna Taylor shooting. Jobless claims still remain high 8 months after the quarantine started, and Trump didn't commit to a peaceful transfer of power? Welcome back to Split the Difference podcast, hosted by Austin Taylor. We got an action-packed show today. We got plenty of things happening. We're looking at stuff on the left. We're looking at stuff on the right. And we are doing our best to find all of that sweet, sweet truth in between. If you, like me and like many other people, find yourself looking around at the world around you, looking at the news and the media and saying, I don't understand why all these people seem so crazy because I'm a reasonable person and most of the people that I know are totally reasonable, then you have found yourself in the right place because that is what this podcast is all about. So we can go ahead and jump in with our first story. As many of you know, and as many of you have heard, there was a black woman that was shot and killed about 6 months ago in Louisville. She was a young woman that the police came into her apartment on a no-knock warrant, shot and killed her. And within the past day or so, the Attorney General announced basically what they would be prosecuting, and it is not great. So in Louisville, protests erupted pretty much everywhere, right? In Louisville, in New York City, Chicago, LA, Washington, pretty much every big city, Atlanta, that has a fairly larger amount of African Americans. Absolutely. The cities just exploded and erupted with protesting, and rightfully so. And we'll get into why rightfully so here in a minute. But it definitely does not look good, right? There have been pretty much nonstop protests for the majority of this year, especially since the George Floyd shooting. But there have been plenty of protests in Louisville over the past, especially over the past couple months. But it looks like now this has started to take off and it's become much more of a countrywide phenomenon, more of a countrywide thing that's happening. And it's good because it does look like a couple changes are going to be made. It's looking like there's a couple of things that are going to be hopefully helping to stop things like this from happening in the future. So, as of right now, what we can do is basically, take a look at that case in particular. I normally like, especially in a lot of these police shootings cases, to look at the specific case and then, kind of move a little bit more outward and then look at what's going on as a whole in the country. So let's just kind of look at the facts. There were 3 people that raided the apartment. 2 of them, I believe, were detectives, and one was just a regular police officer. 6 months ago under a no-knock warrant. And we'll get into what a no-knock warrant is here in a minute. But the cops were actually not looking for either Breonna Taylor or her boyfriend that was in the department either. They were there on a no-knock warrant, basically investigating illegal drug use or illegal drug possession. And upon hearing the cops enter, Taylor's boyfriend thought that people were breaking into the house, supposedly. There was, the Attorney General said that they were able to corroborate the claim by the cops that they actually did knock on the door and announce themselves before going in. But Taylor's boyfriend said that he did not hear them coming in. They were obviously in the middle of sleeping. They were in deep sleep. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning, 12:40 to 1 o'clock in the morning. And he woke up, grabbed his firearm, which he perfectly legally owned, and proceeded to protect their apartment because he thought that there were people breaking into his apartment. He fired his own weapon to protect them and to let the intruders know that he had a weapon. And then former Detective Brett Hankison, Sergeant Jonathan Mattingly, and Detective Miles Cosgrove fired their weapons during the raid. 6 shots hit Breonna Taylor, one of them being fatal. They fired their weapons in total 32 times is what I read, so well over 30 times. It's not like they were just shooting once or twice to protect themselves. Like, they shot a lot of times between all 3 of them. One of them, I believe, shot and did Hankison, the one that it actually ended up being charged and is going to, go on trial. And also has been laid off. He was let go earlier because of all of this. He I believe shot 10 times. So 10 times, depending on the gun that he had, he more than likely did not have a 10-round clip. Most Glocks, or depending on, I guess, the standard weapon of issue for that specific police department, is going to hold probably most of the time around 8 in the clip and 1 in the chamber, or 7 in the clip and 1 in the chamber. So he may very well have had a 10-round, had a 10-round clip. You don't know, or a 10-round magazine. So, but it almost sounds like he, unloaded his gun completely and then had to reload and shoot again. I don't know that to be totally factual, but it kind of stands up. So I guess the important thing is to look at and think about a little bit why people are so angry. And a lot of it has to do with this no-knock warrant. This has been coming under fire for a pretty long time, especially when you're looking at police reform. What are some things that can be done in order to make interactions between police officers and people that they come in contact with safer and less likely to end in violence, especially those between police officers and minorities? And no-knock warrants is one thing that has definitely come under fire. So a no-knock warrant, according to Cornell law, and I'm just going to go ahead and just read this straight off of the Cornell law website, says a no-knock warrant is a search warrant authorizing police officers to enter certain premises without first knocking and announcing their presence or purpose prior to entering the premises. Such warrants are issued where an entry pursuant to the knock and announce rule, i.e. an announcement prior to entry, would lead to the destruction of objects for which the police are searching, or would compromise the safety of the police or another individual. So it kind of gives a little definition of what exactly a no-knock warrant is, but it also gives a little bit of why a no-knock warrant is there. Most of the time, police officers use a no-knock warrant or try to get a no-knock warrant in order to be able to enter a premises without people being able to destroy what it is that they're coming in to get. So you'll oftentimes see these in the cases of, going to try and do a drug bust of some sort, right? So if someone has illegal drugs or illegal paraphernalia and they hear the cops coming in because they knock on the door and they announce themselves, well, then they have enough time to hop up and flush everything down the toilet. That's the reasoning behind it. What a no-knock warrant also obviously does is put everyone there that is present in immediate danger, right? Immediately it puts everyone in danger because a police officer is walking into a situation where he has absolutely no idea what's behind that door, and he knows that he's going to be frightening people. He knows that he's going to be scaring people. People are going to be seeing him and they're going to be looking at him like he's a threat because they don't know who he is, right? And also, I think it's important to point out that I believe all 3 of the cops that came in, or detectives that entered Breonna Taylor's house, were in plain clothes. Every article that I found said that they were not actually in full uniform, but they were in plain clothes when they walked in as well, which makes it even more confusing if you're Breonna Taylor or her boyfriend laying there beside her, right? So the official decision was the grand jury indicted Mr. Hankison on 3 accounts of wanton endangerment stemming from bullets fired recklessly into a neighboring apartment. That was the official statement that was released. So you actually did hear that correctly, right? So I'll read it again. The grand jury indicted Mr. Hankison on 3 counts of wanton endangerment, and I'll explain what wanton endangerment is here in a sec, stemming from bullets fired recklessly into a neighboring apartment. So Hankison actually is not being charged because he shot or because he was involved in a shooting of Breonna Taylor. They're not exactly sure who shot Breonna Taylor. They have one forensic lab that came back and said that it could confirm who it was, but then another one said that it couldn't. Bottom line is, we know that the guy that shot the most came in, is now being charged, but it is for recklessly firing his weapon and the bullets going into the neighboring apartment. It is not because Breonna Taylor was shot and killed. And I think that is what is causing an incredible amount of outrage right now. People are furious because it's almost like you're looking at the justice system and you're saying, this is wrong. You know that this is wrong. This was a completely innocent woman that was shot and killed by police. And we're not saying, the majority of people are not out saying that those police officers purposefully went into Breonna Taylor's apartment to shoot and to kill her, right? Of course, there's going to be some people that are more than likely on the far left that are, hate or want to abolish the entirety of the police force, that are going to say that the police did this premeditated. No, the police obviously did not have a premeditated intent to kill Breonna Taylor, right? There's no evidence for that at all. What there is evidence of is that the police officers acted incredibly recklessly here, incredibly recklessly. So wanton endangerment, the actual charge that is being brought up, is a Class D felony. In other words, it is not very, very high up on the tier list of felonies that you can be charged with. Other examples of Class D felonies are shoplifting, possession of some type of illegal drugs, or stalking, right? So, in other words, they're not throwing the book at this guy, right? To say the least. They're not coming through and throwing the book at him and trying to do anything that they can to be able to put him behind bars because they thought that he did something wrong. Like they're just charging him with what honestly a lot of people expected to happen, right? Like there were a lot of people that have been protesting for a long time in order to be able to get all of this brought up, right? And when it comes down to it, this is kind of standard procedure at this point. Like it is almost like everyone is just used to seeing stuff like this happen. And then police and police officers and, everybody involved just kind of throws their hands up and they're like, oh man, I don't know what happened. Like, yes, it's really sad and it's unfortunate, but like, there's just nothing that you can do. Well, there obviously is stuff that can be done. And for one, getting rid of no-knock warrants is a great place to start, right? So I think that in order to kind of put myself in this position, I legitimately do think about like, all right, if this was me sitting in my house or sitting in my house right now with my wife, and all of a sudden I hear people coming in, if they did knock on the door, if they did bang on the door extremely loudly, they force their way into my house. I don't necessarily know who they are. They're screaming and yelling. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. We are dead asleep. The first thing that I'm going to do is probably grab my gun, right? Of course. Like, why would you? That's why you have the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is there to be able to protect yourself, be able to protect your family in a time when you feel that you are in immediate danger, right? And it's also there to be able to protect yourself from a tyrannical government as well. I'm not saying the police officers are a tyrannical government, but what I am saying is that these police officers were waltzing into their house, into their apartment, very, very loudly in the middle of the night, right? I don't know how you can possibly expect to look at this situation and say, yeah, the police officers did pretty much everything that they're, everything was fine. Nothing went wrong here at all. What I will say though, is that Biden, I did appreciate what Biden came out and said. He came out and finally gave a little bit more context, color around a comment, basically condemning the violence in protests, condemning the violence in the rioting. He said, even amidst the profound grief and anger in today's decision generated, violence is never and can never be the answer. Those who engage in it must be held accountable. Jill and I are keeping the officers shot tonight in Louisville in our prayers. We wish them both swift and full recovery. So, the officers that he's referring to there are during a large amount of the protests. Last night, 2 officers were shot and killed. So basically what is happening, you're seeing this happen all across the United States, is such an incredible amount of mistrust between the citizens of America and the police that are supposed to keep them safe, that people are protesting and rioting in the streets, and the police officers that are then held accountable to go and keep the protests as peaceful as possible are now being shot and killed in the streets as well. It's awful. Like all of it is terrible. And it's because in a lot of states we have these laws that are just diametrically opposed. In Louisville, the state that Louisville is in is a, Southern conservative state, right? It has castle laws. It has stand your ground laws, which protect someone who is in their own, residence to be able to protect their residents if someone is coming in and they don't know who the residence is, right? at the same time, it also has no-knock warrants that protect and plenty of different protections for police officers. If a police officer were to walk into a house without knocking or without announcing himself at all, these things are two diametrically opposed things, right? They didn't find any, not that I've read or heard of, they didn't find any drugs in Breonna Taylor's apartment. They were in the wrong apartment, I believe. So like at the end of the day, these two things of being able to protect your house with a weapon, but also being able to try and take down criminals with a weapon are completely opposed if there's a no-knock warrant that's in place, right? So in the midst of all of this, right, in the midst of all this chaos and this seemingly terrible situation where a young innocent woman that is killed, but also at the same time innocent police officers that are killed in the streets last night during rioting and protesting, it's really easy to kind of get caught up in the craziness of the left is saying that all of the police are horrible. There's people on the left that are saying that all police are racist, all police are terrible, right? We know that that's not true because not all police are terrible, right? You look on the right side of the aisle, and they're saying the police didn't do anything wrong. They're saying that there's no such thing as racism in the United States, or that there is no you don't really see very many cases of black people being shot and killed. That the biggest problem is black people killing black people. We also know that those are incredibly nuanced, right? Like, it's not that simple. You can't just throw out these ridiculous rhetorical phrases. So first, we have to start with under law. Right? Under law, these officers entering the house, it would have been almost impossible to charge any of these men with murder, especially not first degree. Like I said earlier, they did not premeditate killing Breonna Taylor. Now, yes, Breonna Taylor was shot, she was killed, she was murdered in her house, right? But you have to be able to prove that the officers did it with malintent and they went out of their way, or that it was premeditated, especially if you're going to get any type of first degree murder. And it has to be able to be proven without a reason, like beyond a reasonable doubt, right? There's no way that would have flown. So there's no way that you can expect for the officers here to be charged with that. Second, under the current law, they were executing a no-knock warrant correctly. Unfortunately, they technically did enter the apartment legally. Like, the cops went into the apartment, and this was the justification that was done by Cameron, the Attorney General, when he came out and basically talked through all this and told the media what was going on and the decision that had been made. He was saying that the officers were fired upon, and so they had to have the ability to be able to protect themselves, and so they fired their weapons back, right? Well, they were doing technically what is legal under the law. Like, they are allowed to go in and execute a no-knock warrant. And they had the warrant, right? So they technically didn't do anything wrong. Thirdly, we were left with a good amount of unanswered questions from the Attorney General. So it seems like, to me, and granted, maybe this is my opinion, but over 30 rounds being shot into an apartment by 3 people on someone that has one gun, that are totally unsuspecting of you coming in at 1 o'clock in the morning, seems like a little bit overkill, right? Like, that seems like it is very much over the top. That doesn't seem to me like the police officers were just standing there trying to defend themselves, right? Granted, I've never been in a situation where I've walked into a room and somebody didn't know that I was there, and if they started firing on me with a gun. I haven't. And these police officers have to go through that very frequently, which is horrible. But over 30 rounds between 3 people on 2 people laying in bed and 1 person with a gun when they were totally unsuspecting seems like it is way over the top. So my question is then, how much of the investigation was done being able to see that there was actually a reasonable use of force used, right? So, like, there has to be a certain level of investigation, and maybe they did investigate into this. We don't necessarily know because the Attorney General didn't come out and say all the nuances and all the specific things that were picked apart in this. But I kind of want to know, like, are they looking at this from the perspective of they used way too much force for this, right? Like, maybe if they didn't walk in and immediately have guns blazing, Breonna Taylor wouldn't be dead right now. right? There's some different things, like some different nuances, but all of it, at the end of the day, it was to show that there have got to be some pretty dramatic changes that need to be made in how policing is done. Like, there has to be greater accountability. There has to be greater training. There has to be things like no-knock warrants taken away, and there has to be a greater emphasis on being able to give the police officers the resources that they need when they are walking into a situation to know what's happening as much as possible, and to not be walking in guns blazing to a situation where the people have no idea that they're coming in on. And I know that there's no way that you can solve that for every single time, and there's going to be terrible things that happen. I know that, and I realize that, but this seems like it was an accident, quote unquote, that never should have happened, right? It's so difficult for me to be able to look at a situation like this and be able to say, like, I really can see both sides of this, right? It's really difficult to do it. There are other cases where you can understand why the police officers reacted in the way that they did, and you can understand the incredible pressure that they were under. For this one, it's much more difficult, right? So there has the calls upon to change and to reform police are good things, and you're starting to see stuff like that happen. Like the city of Louisville had to pay Breonna Taylor's family her estate $12 million. There are multiple different pieces of police reform that are coming in through Louisville. They're doing a full top to bottom sweep of the entire department to look at it and examine it to see who the officers are that are working there, the different charges, I guess, or accusations that have come against them. Like, they're trying to walk through this and hopefully make this right. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that there have been majority peaceful protests. It's unfortunate that some of them devolved into violence within the last night or two, and it's incredibly unfortunate that those police officers were shot and killed in the line of duty when they were really just doing their job. But it's a difficult situation, but there are ways to make things better. And they have to be done by the politicians, and it has to be done through a compromise, right? It can't be done by abolishing all the police, and it can't be done by sticking your head in the sand and acting like there's nothing wrong at all, right? So that's first story done. What we'll do is I want to break it up a little bit with what I'm going to call Fun Fact Friday. So this is going to be fun. It's going to be factual because today's Friday. So first, I actually saw this on a little fun fact thing online, and I thought it's maybe not super fun, but it is extremely interesting because I did not know this. Volkswagen, the automaker out of Germany, also manufactures one other product on a very, very large scale. All right, that's not automobiles. So obviously almost all their manufacturing is automobiles, but they do actually manufacture one other thing. It's sausage. They manufacture sausage, and it's called the Volkswagen Currywurst. I'm not making this up. This is real life. You can look it up. They manufactured over almost 7 million sausages last year. I don't know why I thought that was so funny, but I just cannot imagine a car company thinking that it's a great idea to get into the sausage making business. But they have, and it's been around since like 1973. So you can go on the Volkswagen website and look it up. And they have like an official item number for it. I think a lot of it is for their sales staff to go and pass out sausages, but I think they also sell them in grocery stores as well in Germany. So I thought that was super interesting. That's fun. And that's your Fun Fact Friday. Second story today comes with jobless claims that came in for this past week. So I monitor the economy closely, just the same way as all of us should. And over the past 8 months, especially early April, when jobless claims or unemployment had made a peak, it was up in the millions every single week, right? Well, new claims for unemployment have pretty much held steady at right between about 750,000 and 900,000 a week. Throughout the entirety of the month of September, right? So last week it went up to about 170,000 new jobless claims in the United States. And that is disconcerting to say the least. There's a couple reasons why I guess this is a little worrying. One It shows that the economy and the labor market is not heating up nearly the way that Donald Trump or the Republicans make it out to be, right? Like it is very, very clear that the labor market and the economy as a whole is pretty much just bumping right along really, really slow. Like we're starting to recover a little bit. It's going up. It's getting a little bit better, but it is not moving quickly. Second thing, if the labor market does not tighten, right? If the labor market does not get better, then there's going to be a serious economic recession that hits eventually, right? There's no way that you can have a labor market that's not tight, and you can have the amount of people that are out of jobs and continuing to request for assistance from the federal government without there being something that gives eventually. The Federal Reserve and the federal government can pump as much cash into the economy as they want through stimulus, which it's obvious they really haven't done all that much in comparison to a lot of other countries. But they can continue to pump money into the economy, but eventually the bill's going to come around. You can continue to accumulate all this debt at the federal level, but eventually the debt is going to be called, right? And when that debt is called, if there continues to be a labor market that is not tight, there continues to be a high unemployment rate, wages are not going up, inflation is going up, interest rates are low, then there's going to be a problem. And then the last thing, I've mentioned this before because it's something that I think that I've thought about a lot. I'm a little bit more libertarian, especially when it comes to the government's impact and the government's hand moving in the economy. I prefer for them to stay out of it. But with a weak labor market, there is no way that we as a country are going to be able to pay back the amount of debt that we racked up this year, right? These were incredibly unprecedented circumstances, and I know that there were a lot of people that called for the federal government to step in and to give money to the people that needed it, right? But at this point, jobless claims are still continuing to hover and still continuing to even go up a little bit. And we are 8 months since the start of this coronavirus, right? And the coronavirus doesn't look like it's going away anytime soon. So there's still going to be, restaurants that are at half capacity. There's still going to be, small businesses that are going under and people that aren't able to employ or rehire people that they had to furlough or lay off earlier in the year. And eventually the bill and the debt has to be paid. And the only way that the government is able to take in, one of the only ways, the biggest way the government's able to take in money is through taxes, right? So they're either going to have to increase taxes or they're going to have to be able to find a way to get that money from something else. Well, they're not going to find a way to get anywhere else. It's going to be coming out of our pockets, right? And over the next 2 to 3 to 5 to 10 years, you're going to start to see taxes go up because the government has to be able to pay this stuff off, or they're going to have to start defaulting on a lot of the things that are payments that they give to people through welfare or Social Security or Medicare and Medicaid. Eventually, you run out of money. Like the United States government is not just this endless pot of money that just continues to flow and flow and flow. Like it's going to eventually run out of money. And when it does, a lot of these countries that have been dependent on us or that are purchasing our debt are not going to be willing to purchase our debt anymore. So, all of this, of course, is going on while Congress continues to stall on passing any other type of relief bill or saying whether or not they're going to pass a relief bill. Basically, the Republicans in the Senate and the Democrats in the House are just kicking bills back and forth. The Democrats passed a bill a couple months ago called the HEROES Act. That was another $3 trillion worth of stimulus. They knew the Republicans in the Senate weren't going to pass that. The Republicans turn around then and they pass basically what they call like a skinny deal, or a skinny stimulus, where they tried to kick it back over to the Democrats, and the Democrats are like, well, that doesn't leave us any negotiating room. So both the Democrats and Republicans, per usual, can't agree on what's going on, and there are plenty of people that are hurting right now. I still think the fact that they gave $500 billion to large corporations a couple months ago in the CARES Act was ridiculous. If there's anybody that needed that money, it was the small mom and pop shops down the road that needed it. Well, it wasn't them that got any of that stimulus money, right? And I guess I can keep jumping up and down and screaming and yelling that, but at the end of the day, nothing's going to change because they're going to keep lining the pockets of large corporations. as much as they possibly can. So basically what's happening right now is the Republicans are acting like they're trying to do everything that they can to get things done, and the Democrats are trying to act like they're doing everything to get things done. And neither of them are really doing anything. They're pretty much just kicking the ball back and forth. And hardly any houses are getting listed on the real estate market. There's down 20 to 25%. We're at an incredibly slow, the entire economy has slowed down significantly. Unemployment is still high. Federal aid is running out, and the economy is just sitting at a real slow burn right now. Lastly, this is just going to be a quick clip because I saw this and I've seen this all over absolutely everything today. But basically, all of the left-wing media sites have been going on and on about how Trump refused to say that he was going to have a peaceful transfer of power if he loses, right? So let's hop into this video and take a look.
Win, lose, or draw in this election, will you commit here today for a peaceful transferal of power after the election? There has been rioting in Louisville. There's been rioting in many cities across this country, red and your so-called red and blue states. Will you commit to making sure that there is a peaceful transferal of power after the election?
Well, we're going to have to see what happens. You know that I've been complaining very strongly about the ballots, and the ballots are a disaster.
I understand that, but people are rioting. Do you commit to making sure that there's a peaceful transferal of power?
We want to get rid of the ballots, and we'll have a very peaceful. There won't be a transfer, frankly. There'll be a continuation. The ballots are out of control. You know it. And you know who knows it better than anybody else? The Democrats know it.
So he finishes there saying that the Democrats know better than anybody that the ballots are out of control. So I have seen this all over the news. I've seen this everywhere. Everyone's mad at Donald Trump because they're saying Donald Trump is refusing to say that he's going to peacefully transfer power, right? Trump said that he wouldn't agree to transfer the power if he were to lose. Don't get me wrong. His response there was not fantastic and it's not great. And I am not and will probably never be the biggest fan of anything that Trump says, right? I think that Trump sticks his foot in his mouth almost every single day, right? But that was a no-win question for Trump. It was obviously set up. Every single bit of that, the guy that asked that question knew that he was asking it in a way to put Trump on the spot. That's what a lot of those reporters do. That's what they enjoy to do, right? They're trying to get good, quick sound bites, okay? And he asked Trump if he was going to peacefully transfer power, right? If Trump answers yes to that, then he's basically saying, I think I'm going to lose, right? Trump's not going to say that. No politician is going to say that, right? They're never going to openly admit that they think that they're going to lose or that they've even thought about losing, right? Of course they're not going to say that. At the same time, if he says no, obviously everyone's going to lose their marbles. Everyone's just going to go totally bananas thinking that Trump is saying that he's going to become the next dictator of the United States. When Trump is saying that the balloting is terrible, I'm not sure what he was even trying to hint at. I guess he's talking about the mail-in ballots. I guess he's talking about early voting. I don't know necessarily. He was incredibly unclear about what he meant by the ballots, because without the ballots, you can't vote. But the dude is obviously not standing up there saying that if he loses to Joe Biden, that he's going to commandeer the military and that he's going to create a totalitarian dictatorship in the United States with Donald Trump leading the head. That is outrageous. That's ridiculous. Trump is a lot of things. He's a lot of things that are pretty negative, but I don't think that Trump is literally trying to be the dictator of the United States. That is not what he was going for. Everyone is going crazy about this because they're trying to get sound bites. They're trying to act like Donald Trump is just this, he's got 666 like scrawled into his head, and he's, some horrible fascist that's trying to take over the world and everything. Donald Trump was trying to dodge that question politically, like the same way that every other politician does. But he's trying to talk about ballot fraud. I don't know what he's doing there. Listen, if you put words in Trump's mouth like that, and you make it seem like he's saying a whole bunch of stuff when he really isn't saying a whole bunch of stuff, then nobody's going to believe you when you later on go and you say that he is saying something terrible when he actually is, right? The whole crying wolf by the Democrats is done all the time with Donald Trump, and they're kind of playing it out a little bit. But anyways, that's the show. Thank you for joining. Thank you for following in. Thank you for listening in. We appreciate all of the support that you give. Please remember to look us up on Instagram. Please remember to look us up on all different social medias that we're at right now. Send me in your questions, thoughts, concerns, and always remember, stay reasonable. Just be a reasonable person. Don't be crazy. Stay level-headed and always split the difference.